So today we will be presenting our fungi group presentation. I am Aaliyah Beard.
I'm Peyton Fritchie.
I'm Gabby Jocson.
And I'm Cassie Klink.
BASIDIOMYCOTA. BASIDIOMYCOTA are a monophyletic group of fungi, meaning all the organisms share a common ancestor. These fungi generally reproduce sexually from the gills, which are scientifically known as the basidia, found below the basidiocarps, which is also known as the cap of the mushroom. There are basidium, and they will usually form up to 4 basidiospores, each with their own nuclei. They're easily dispersed, and they can begin germination and continue the life cycle. Among Basidiomycota are some of the most well-known edible mushrooms, such as portobello, button mushrooms, and enoki mushrooms. Not all are edible, though. Some are poisonous and cause disease in animals. Most of the mushroom poisonings and deaths each year are linked to some Basidiomycota, like the death cap mushroom and destroying angel mushroom, that are extremely poisonous due to the high levels of lethal toxin they can produce, called AFLATOXINs. The highest levels of AFLATOXINs will be found within the basidiocarp and basidia of them. Consumption of either of these is fatal.
So for my portion of the presentation, I looked at some examples of Basidiomycota, and we have rust. Rust fungi belong to the subphylum Basidiomycotina, which is considered the earliest diverging lineage of Basidiomycota. So they serve as a great example. All rust fungi are parasites of plants, and they're found in all areas where plants grow, including high altitude areas and deserts. Rust fungi can only be grown on living plants, so in order to study the fungus, the plant has to continue to grow. The general rust life cycle requires 5 different spore stages and alternation between 2 taxonomically unrelated host plants, which is pretty crazy. So that makes it one of the most complex life cycles within the fungus kingdom. Rust can cause considerable damage to their hosts and are important pathogens in agriculture, horticulture, industrial, forest habitats, and much more. Many severe diseases are caused by rusts, and there are many examples, but to name a few, we have sugarcane, fruits, vegetables, wheat, corn, grains, and legumes. And on the next slide, we have smuts. They're another type of Basidiomycota, and it's a type of fungi that attacks any part of the plant that is above the ground. So it is common to see them on leaves, stems, and flowers. It infects individual plant tissues, which can cause a boil to grow. So initially the boil looks white, but then it turns to spores, which makes it look black. The spores are dark in pigmentation, which is the black looking image, and they're circular, ornate, and can be covered in ridges. There's a variety of different types of smut diseases, but the most common are seen to grow on grains, grasses, onions, and various flowering plants. There are some allergic reactions that humans can experience through the inhalation of smut, like asthma and bronchitis.
So looking at the aflatoxins next. Aflatoxins are a type of mycotoxin that is produced by fungus. It impacts our way of life through the food that we eat. So we have to kind of be careful about what we're eating. We also have to be careful about what our livestock is eating, because we can find aflatoxins even in things like cheese and eggs, because the animals that make these foods eat the grains that have the aflatoxins within it. Specifically talking here, for an example, is corn can be especially problematic due to the environment that it is raised, which is kind of a good environment for these aflatoxins. And it is eaten so widespread around the world that you kind of can see this worldwide having an impact on not only what we eat, but also what we are feeding our livestock. One example of it is this Aspergillus flavus, which is depicted in these pictures on the slide. This was the cause of more than 100,000 young poultry dying in England around the year 1961. They found the aflatoxin within a batch of Brazilian peanut food, which was then fed to turkeys, chickens, and ducks, which resulted in all of these animals dying, which then led to the loss of that food source, led to a loss of income, a lot of big problems. There is a couple of different types of aflatoxins. One of them, not to get too deep into it, but the B1 is extremely carcinogenic. It is actually thought to be 100 times more carcinogenic than compounds found within cigarette smoke. And beyond like the actual health impact, these aflatoxins obviously have an impact on our economic prosperity because of the impact that it has on our crops and our livestock. These pictures down at the bottom of the slide are examples of what corn looks like when infected by aflatoxins. You can see that the outside is a little brown, but it doesn't look too bad. But then as soon as you pull that husk off of the corn, you start to see how gross the corn actually looks when infected. So it is thought that about 25% of our annual crop yield is lost to mycotoxins, which aflatoxin is the most well-known and researched of the mycotoxins. So all of this to say how terrible it is, but because it is so widespread and because it's kind of in basically everything we eat, the FDA has deemed a certain percentage of this to be an unavoidable contaminant in our food. So we're essentially eating these every day, but because it is such a low amount, it's unlikely to cause any major health issues, and the FDA just kind of brushes it off and says that this level is acceptable.
In addition to the previous information, I will be expanding on the effects of aflatoxins on humans and ecology. First, I will begin with the effect of aflatoxins on humans. This fungi is primarily transferred through the consumption of contaminated food. Food can become infected through growth and storage. Some foods that aflatoxins are commonly found in are cereals, oilseeds, spices, and tree nuts. The graphic below shows different types of oilseeds that aflatoxins could be found in. Next, agricultural workers could become infected by inhaling dust from processing contaminated crops. This causes an issue in the workplace as it may decrease productivity levels and lead to hazards. Moving on to the next point, animals provide us with a source of food from its products. If animals eat contaminated food, then we too may become infected because we are eating the products they are producing. It could simply be described as a chain reaction from the infected host. One symptom of aflatoxin is acute aflatoxosis, which comes from exposure to large doses. This ultimately leads to critical illness and possibly death. Aflatoxin is linked to cancer susceptibility because of its nature of being extremely carcinogenic. It alters the DNA alkylation of the body, causing mutations in essential genes. The more common side effects of aflatoxins include acute liver failure, which leads to additional health complications such as fever, nausea, and vomiting. Next slide. Now transitioning to the effect of aflatoxins on ecology. Aflatoxins in soil change the chemical characteristics, therefore changing the ecosystem as a whole. Altering soil microbes impact the soil quality and its ability to enrich plants. The graphic below shows the cycle of mycotoxin interaction with soil properties. Also, another impact of aflatoxins on the environment is climate change. Changes in the environment as a result of climate change may alter the distribution and occurrence of aflatoxins in an area. For example, wind patterns could cause aflatoxins to be moved from one location to another. Similarly, weather events such as precipitation affect water availability, which impact fungal growth and proliferation. An increase in rainfall can affect where fungi can survive. There are optimal weather conditions for aflatoxins to grow in. Aflatoxin is produced optimally in warm temperatures. Any alterations in weather could increase or decrease the growth of aflatoxins and its distribution across an area. As a result, this affects the number of crops being processed and distributed as goods for people to consume. It is difficult to produce and export goods to consumers when there are environmental factors that may affect the growth variability patterns of aflatoxins. And on the next slide, we have our references for our BASIDIOMYCOTA references. And on this slide, we have our references from our aflatoxin slides. And that is the end of our presentation. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate your time and attention, and we look forward to answering any questions or comments you guys have in our discussion board.